Hey, Jonathan, for the record, you're attending remotely from?
Well, from up the street, I was coming in, but I was running late, so I figured I'd call in.
Okay. So you're using one of your, I guess, permissive so you're remote but on the road, is that? Or at home?
That. Yeah. Yep.
At home in Arlington.
Right.
Okay. Now, we're supposed to reflect in the minutes when you're attending remotely the where from. So.
All righty.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Any public comment? Louise, do you have anything?
I do not. Mr.
All right.
Chair.
Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. All right. Let's see. I think that brings us to chair's update. And at the top of the list, always and forever now, need a volunteer to take minutes.
Oh, okay. I'll take notes, but do you want someone else want to take minutes? Because no.
Any other volunteers for minutes? Minutes.
Okay.
I'll do it. All right. And I guess while we're at it on the minutes, January minutes have been circulated thanks to Jim Smith. Jim had prepared them, even though he wasn't there. He took the transcript and video and made magic. And we had January minutes. Do we have any changes? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt our January minutes.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jonathan, you good with the?
I am.
All right. They move. And that also brings us to the September minutes that have been circulated. Thanks to Prescott, we've got the September minutes. Do we have any changes, edits to them? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt them.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor of adopting them?
Aye.
Aye. Got an eye there, John. Okay. Got that. I think we're all caught up now. Isn't that right, Richard?
I'll submit it to July.
I think so. I will double check this week.
Weren't they? Or did we circulate? Yeah, July. I think I think they've been circulated. If not, just in case we didn't, July minutes. I believe they've been circulated. Prescott prepared them. I think they were good, and I'll entertain a motion just in case
double secret.
Double secret, just in case we haven't adopted them, we'll re-adopt. I'll entertain a motion to adopt, just in case we have. I think we have, but maybe not.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Jonathan?
Aye.
All right, I think they're good. All right, all right. I think that really means we're caught up. All right, and just to give you a quick preview for the rest of the year, November meeting, we're going to do the county website update with David Hurley, and then the December meeting, we'll get an update or a presentation on the Phase 2 broadband study report from Holly Hartel and Jennifer Scout. And that I have circulated the report and I think the slides as well. So if you want to take a look before December, and both of those meetings are virtual. November's and November 29th after Thanksgiving, and it's quite possible I may be flying over the Pacific at that time. So I may, depending on the satellite broadband and the time and all that stuff, I may or may not be able to attend that one. So I am deputizing John to run that one. And then the December meeting will be December 20th, before Christmas. So anyhow, that is the chair's update. We have come to item number 4, the county legislative priorities update. We have Ilana Cranen, and please correct me if I have mispronounced, but she's the county's legislative liaison, is going to fill us in. And we have, I have submitted our legislative priorities to the board. So thank you.
Amazing. Hello. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. My name is, you're super, super close, Alana Crennan, just a soft E, but you're all good. I apologize that I sound so hoarse. I am getting over a really bad cold. So if you see me mute for a moment, it's because I need to cough and I don't want to cough into the microphone. So thank you all so much for having me and for, rearranging the order of things so I could be here with you tonight. Just kind of a brief overview. So I'm presenting the county's legislative package at the November meeting on, would be November 11th, but it's likely going to be at the recessed meeting on the 14th for the fact that the election is on the 7th. And we want to know what the results of the election are. We need to make sure that we have the package out with enough time for all of you to see and comment, etc. And so in order to do that, I'm likely going to be going at the recessed meeting on that following Tuesday. At that meeting, there will be public comment on the package. Excuse me one moment. Apologies. So there will be public comment on the package at that meeting, and then following the meeting on the 14th, on the 28th, which is 2 Tuesdays later, we will have a work session with our General Assembly delegation, where we will learn more about what their priorities are, share our priorities, and have a really collaborative briefing from 6 to 8 p.m. in the evening that is open to the public. Following that, we will have the adoption of the package at the December, I think it's 19th meeting, taking into account all of our public comment, staff comments, board comments, the work session, etc. And then we will, adopt a final version. The session this year begins on, I think it's January 10th. It's the second Wednesday in January. And it is a long session this year, which means that the governor has a new 2-year budget to introduce in late December, and the General Assembly will work on passing that budget. This year, because it is a new 2-year budget, they have to pass a budget by July 1st. Last year, as you might remember, they dragged on budget negotiations until the beginning of September because there was already this larger 2-year budget in place. So this year, if they don't get something done by July 1st, then the state government shuts down. And I don't think anyone wants that to happen. So so everyone's going to be working hard to make sure we have a budget by July 1st. Hopefully we have it by March 9th when we actually conclude the session, and then we will learn more on the night of the election in 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks actually, as to what the results will be and what, the next 2 years look like. I appreciate the letter that you all sent to the county board. I was reading through it. I just wanted to go through kind of some of the priorities. I had a few questions on it, but first I wanted to open it up. Do you have any questions on the information I just shared with all of you?
We have a hand up.
I have one
Jack.
question. When do we have, or do we already have, the state's balance from the year? Because that was what was under debate last time.
You mean the state's budget, or like how much money there is that, can be allocated by the General Assembly?
Yes, there was a surplus last year, and that we debated about until July. So I'm asking when that balance of the surplus, what date that becomes available, because that will give us an idea of where, what the amount is there may be debating aside from the base.
So right now, they just gave their September report, and the economic indicators are pointing towards a very large surplus. The budget, when it's presented on December 20th, is what they will kind of use as the benchmark for that surplus. Right now, I'm trying to find everything is basically coming in higher than predicted. So, we have good labor market strength, everything. All indicators are coming in above projections, but they're not going to necessarily like cut a number until December 20th that we're going to actually go with. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, the indicators now are that there will be a significant surplus. is the answer.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yes.
I guess I have one other process question.
Yes, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the commissions all submit our recommendations. We're going to talk about our specific recommendations. Does the staff present recommendations or the manager's office, and how are those collected?
Yes. So
Are the
each
folks that we work with here separately ask for their recommendations, and then do those go to the manager and get presented as the manager's recommendations?
Mm-hmm. So I am the legislative liaison for the county, so I'm in the manager's office. And I meet directly with each department to talk about their parties. So like I met with Norrin and Richard. I met with, the housing department. I met with our economic development department. The list goes on and on. There's like 20 different departments. And so every department presents their recommendations. All the commissions get the opportunity to present their recommendations. Each county board member gets, the chance to weigh in too. So my goal is to make it as transparent and as a collaborative process as possible. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to get everything that they want in the package, but I like to at least make sure that everyone can have, their voice heard.
So will we see what each department presented? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
So
Or
what
is it
you'll
all put bundled together? Will we be able to look at what came from the departments that are ITAC?
So that would be what's actually in the package itself. So
I'm
their process is different than submitting from letters to the county board.
right, but does the manager's report break out by department what the recommendations are?
No, it does not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of the letter, I had a question about your first priority on the adoption of the cloud services. So my read of that is that you're asking the Commonwealth to create a program that would kind of make a more standard approach to cloud technologies, almost like a Commonwealth cloud, I guess you could call it, for localities to join. And
That's,
sorry, go ahead.
that's not the intent.
Okay, please clarify. Yes.
So whenever you're adopting a new cloud technology or cloud service provider, commercial service provider, there's the question around cybersecurity of that service provider, whether or not they're secure, whether or not they meet our security standards to process our data, right?
Okay.
It costs a lot of money to answer that question. If one municipality answers that question for example, in Amazon Web Services, we shouldn't need every other municipality to independently answer that question about Amazon Web Services and the numerous services that they provide. And so what we're asking or suggesting is that the Commonwealth create a program to reuse those security assessments, make them transparent to municipalities so that, and create a standard by which everyone can live by from a security perspective, so that municipalities know that when they're adopting one of these commercial service providers' offerings, that it is secure and it is secure to process people's data at the right levels. That's a gross oversimplification, but that's the ask.
Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying. I appreciate that very much. I read it a little differently, and what I read was not what I assumed it was not what you intended, because it sounded like you almost wanted to relinquish local authority and say that everyone has to use a system like this, that everyone's using the same providers, that everyone's using the same cloud. And I had a feeling that was not what your intent was. So thank you for offering that clarification.
So let me chime in just a little bit, and Richard, you can jump in if you need to. So when you say secure, there's no guarantees it's going to be secure. Just
Understood.
want to make sure that's understood.
Yep.
They'll have a baseline security controls, and customers can ask for additional rigor with security controls on a case-by-case basis, which is at an additional cost, which they'll disclose, but it's through an NDA as well. So what we make it is an NDA with AWS, Oracle, or whomever. The other jurisdictions aren't necessarily going to do the same thing.
Right.
So, but a baseline, yes, they should all have an established baseline, but I just want to make sure we're clear that secure does not mean secure. It's just they have security controls in place.
Yeah, it's really about reusing the work that's already been done, leveraging the work that's already been done on security so that it doesn't have to be done over and over and over again.
Yep.
And the model is really the federal government's FedRAMP program.
Yeah, so baseline controls in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was the federal government program you just mentioned?
FedRAMP. There's FedRAMP, there's also state RAMP.
Federal Risk and Accountability Modernization Program, I think is what the RAMP stands for. There is a state RAMP program that Arizona started. I don't know how many states are actually participating. So again, the recommendation is either to create or join a program like that.
Okay, got it.
Virginia's not on that list.
I know. There's not very many people on it.
Okay.
But it both makes it easier for municipalities to adopt cloud services, and it also makes it easier for cloud service providers to sell to municipalities, which creates a greater market, which creates more economic activity, which is good.
Okay. Great. Okay.
So the state could use FedRAMP as their like guiding,
So right now, states are not able to participate in FedRAMP.
okay, but can they adopt basically?
There are good things and bad things about FedRAMP, so it's an example of what we're talking about.
But states can adopt something similar, basically.
Yeah, FedRAMP is
That's
generally
what
it's their authorization process for FedRAMP.
Right, and that's what we're advocating, is that Virginia. And didn't we have some indication that Virginia was doing something? I thought at some point, but
So the idea is really municipalities need to be using cloud technologies, but they need to be doing it in a way that's secure and rigorous. And it costs a lot of money to do that. And if the state was able to leverage work that's already been done to lower the costs, more municipalities could adopt cloud services faster, more securely, to everybody's benefit.
Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for clarifying. I'm gonna work on some wordsmithing on that priority so that we can make it into the package. I wanted to touch on the last one about the open meetings. That one is going to be in the package as well. We are going to advocate for more expanded virtual participation options. Right now, that is hinging on the election results and what happens. I'm going to keep that in our package regardless. But it seems to be a trend that the Democrats want open meetings virtually for commissions, and that the Republicans do not seem to be as keen on that idea right now. I think part of it comes in as a backlash to how the Democrats treated the Republicans during the 2021 session when they did have a virtual session. There's also broadband concerns for some of the more rural Republican localities as well. And so that's kind of what's driving that issue, but that will be in our package as well. Do you have any other questions for me? Okay.
I think we did have one, I think, note about a legislative, federal.
Oh, yes.
The affordable connectivity program, I think we mentioned that we support, additional funding. And my understanding is the White House Office of Management and Budget is going to soon be making a recommendation that additional funding be provided to that program, the ACP program. Because right now it's projected to run out of funds in April of next year. So.
Okay. Sure, I'm happy to pass those notes along to our federal delegation as well.
Okay, thank you. We've just, I think in the distant past, we actually, I think, did submit some letters under our own, and we realized that's not the way we should go. So I guess if we did have a federal proceeding that we wanted to have the county weigh in, should that go through you? Or should we go through a liaison?
So I would recommend, so I mostly do our state priorities. What I would recommend, I would either go through, let me think about this. You're welcome to CC me on the email. What would end up happening is I would forward it along to the district representatives in Arlington. So that would be like Noah Simon in Congressman Byers' office, or her name is Jacqueline in Warner's office, or Oriella in Kane's office. And so I can always just pass your letters along to them to then pass along to the senator. If you would rather go through the board office to do that, that's fine with me. There's not necessarily a set of a process when it comes to the federal delegation as there is with the state level priorities.
Right. I mean, it seems that it'd be better that we get some buy-in before we go forward.
Yeah, I mean, if there is, if there are other members of, like, if there are board members who are interested in the issue as well, you can always have their buy-in. If there are other regional groups that are, promoting the same idea, or other, and by regional, I mean, whether it's, the Information Technology Advisory Commission in Alexandria and Fairfax as well, or if there's, like the Northern Virginia Technology Council, for example. So either option is always a good one too.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Do we have any other questions for Ilana? Do you have any other questions for us?
No. Thank you so much for having me. I don't know, I hope this was beneficial. If ever, I know this year we're kind of late in the process of the package. If I'm invited back in the future and can come earlier, sometimes it's a little more like collaborative of like, how do we determine what goes on your letter? Or I can, always give like an update kind of in like September of like where things are headed. So this year's a little wonky in that it's also like such a big election year and so much is up in the air. So I really appreciate your patience and appreciate you all having me tonight.
Right, and we appreciate you joining us and filling us in. So thank you very much.
Of course.
Being able to work with you in the future.
Of course. Take care.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Well, just let me know next year when you want me to come, and happy to do so.
Thank you. Great.
All right. Take care. Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care. Let's see, I think that brings us to item number 5, the performance parking pilot update with Melissa McMahon, the parking and curb space manager for the county and DES. So thank you for coming back and joining us, Melissa. And we did circulate, I believe I circulated your.
Yes, you did.
Yes. So I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions.
Excellent. I'm really glad to be back. Thank you all for having me. So again, I'm Melissa McMahon, Parking and Curb Space Manager. I'm in the Transportation Engineering and Operations Bureau of the Division of Transportation. And tonight I'm going to, my slide set has about 19 slides, and I'm going to kind of go faster through the front end because it covers some of the ground that we covered before, and spend more time on the back end because that includes the most relevant next step in our project to make sure we have time to get your feedback on that. So with that, as a reminder, the performance parking pilot in commercial corridors, really it comes straight out of our master transportation plan. And it is a technology pilot, technology test project to utilize meter pricing strategies that vary by hour and location to better match our parking availability and demand. This slide has the reminders of what our project doesn't seek to do directly. It is not seeking to increase overall parking revenue. So we really are looking at occupancy and the corollaries to occupancy, what I would call the customer experience piece, as the targets of what we're influencing, and not, we don't know what direction that's going to shape revenue. We're also not seeking to increase all meter parking rates across the board, again, because it's performance-based. It's not a blanket change. We are not seeking to decrease the number of reserved ADA accessible parking spaces. We are also not creating a dynamically or fast-changing metered pricing program. So this isn't like our express lanes on 66, 495, and 395. And it's not like surge pricing by ride-hailing companies where you don't know what price until like the moment you hit go. In this case, we're talking about pricing changes that would happen no more often than quarterly. We are also not changing the type of curbside use from metered parking to something else entirely. This project puts technology actually in our metered parking spaces. And one of the challenges we have is making sure we don't lose metered parking spaces that have the technology in them in the midst of our pilot project, which is just a funny, as most of you probably realize, there's always an ebb and flow of activity in the right-of-way and changes in what, you know, businesses need or what projects are happening in construction and that and the other. So we're trying to keep those metered spaces in our project. This is a somewhat simplified map of our project areas. For purposes of this pilot, we are only using metered parking spaces in our Metro Rail corridors. So the Roslyn-Ballston corridor and the Crystal City, Pentagon City, Potomac Yard corridor. However, that said, that is 4,500 metered parking spaces, and it's the vast majority of the metered parking spaces in the county. There are some on Columbia Pike, for instance, and perhaps Langston Boulevard, but by and large, this is the majority of all of our inventory. So progress-wise, we find ourselves at the substantially complete phase of our installation. So last time that we met, we were still in the midst of our installation, but we are really at the final pieces of it. We still have some holes we're trying to fill as construction projects in the right-of-way wrap up, and we'll be able to fill some of those gaps. But we've got a little over 4,100 sensors, almost 4,200 sensors installed out of a total number of stalls in our project. We're hoping for a 4,500. And again, some of those may not come live for a bit of time given construction activity, but as soon as they are available and the meters are active, we schedule them to be filled in with our sensor technology. So we did outreach and engagement during our first phase, and during from February to September, really, maybe August, our engagement was focused on raising awareness of the project as a whole and getting community input on the prioritizing the goals of the project. Because we did establish goals in the process of getting this grant, in the process of designing the project for grant funding, but we really wanted to make sure we were hearing from community members about their relative priorities across them. We reached 135 people through an online feedback form. We installed over 600 decals on multimeters in our project areas, and that resulted in over 1,700 sort of click-throughs, visits to our project page directly from those decals and QR codes. 4 pop-ups in the community, which also resulted in a total of 100 interactions with community members. And we did find that some of the responses we got from people in the pop-ups versus the online form were a little bit different. While we were installing technology, we also did door-to-door outreach across all of the corridors that were being impacted by our, I'll call it construction process, because we did have to shut down some stretches of parking metered spaces while we were installing the sensors. And we used those opportunities to let businesses know about the project, provide flyers with information, direct them to the best of their abilities to jump on the project page and learn more. So we touched over 260 businesses in large residential buildings that way. And as you know, I stopped by this commission and several others during that first phase of outreach. So this is just a list of the folks that I had conversations with or provided presentations to, as well as our first virtual public meeting, which happened in February. And we are actually, I think I've got a slide toward the end, but we will be doing another recorded, more detailed recorded presentation, which will be available online, and I'll talk about an open house that we have scheduled coming up in December. So highlights from our outreach from the first phase. People are interested in improving their experience with parking. So that's definitely there, especially where the solutions save time. So it's somewhat notable that we didn't hear as much about ensuring that parking is free or cheap, although we hear it occasionally, but it was really about travel time savings, confidence in finding parking on the first try, and the ease of finding parking. The nuances that appeared more in our pop-up discussions with folks, reducing mobile emissions and reducing double parking, because we did encounter more folks in our pop-ups who were not as routine drivers, so they experienced the parking problems in a slightly different way, and they have a different kind of interest, perhaps, in those parking issues being resolved. We also had 16% of respondents to our feedback form report that they have a disability that impacts their mobility, and they tended to value more highly than other respondents less double parking, less time looking for parking, and getting people to shift to less well-used blocks, because I think they're looking for access to those well-used blocks, as well as greater enforcement of the parking space. And we have a full summary of that outreach available on the project webpage for you at any time. Other project activities underway as we speak are the finalization of our pricing engine design, and that the pricing engine is sort of a maybe jargony term to describe how our vendors are going to be pushing to us a price recommendation. And that price recommendation is based on rules that we set, such as we want to see an example set of rules, but one that might vary over the course of the project is that prices should stay the same if occupancy is between 40 and 80%. But when it's over 80%, customers are going to experience a problem, and we're going to look to potentially increase price in those locations. And when it's below 40%, we could consider, if there are other factors at play, such as proximity to high occupancy areas, we could consider lowering price. So that's an example of a set of rules. That's how we have it set up presently in our effort to build our way to a first price proposal to kick off that part of the process. However, it is something that might change over time as we see what the data says about how price changes are influencing demand. We're also actively working on our public interface designs. In the slide set, I've got 2 screenshots. We are expecting to actually make available and roll out to folks both of these tools. One of them on the right-hand side is Curb IQ. It's a particular type of curb viewer, and you can see that it uses sort of a block face imagery around occupancy, with darker being more occupied and lighter being less occupied. The tool and that's live data that we can see on both tools. The tool on the left-hand side is a little bit more like, I would say like a Google Maps view that we're familiar with. And as you zoom into that tool, it gets more granular, all the way down to the space level, really, about the occupancy of those spaces and the type of space and the price of the space. So they do similar things, but they're not identical, and we're looking forward to providing people access to both, because we're also interested in seeing what people's reactions are to the 2 approaches. We have our opinions, but we're saving them so that the public can respond to these options. The one on the left, by the way, will also have the ability to assist with navigation to spaces. So that's kind of cool. That's a feature that the one on the right does not have.
And is there, maybe we'll come to it, is there going to be integration of the sort of availability app with the payment app, because I know there's a couple different vendors on payment now.
Right, so the two availability apps that are really a part of the pilot will
Right.
have availability and price. The payment function, which currently the mobile payment approach we have for our on-street spaces, Park Mobile, they will have access to a public API and they'll be able to use it to show the same data that these two apps show, but in their interface. So we don't know yet what to expect with how they'll visualize it, but we do expect that they'll take it up. So anyone who is a Park Mobile user will be able to use the Park Mobile app and potentially see the same data. Yeah, so that'll be like a third option. But we did want to make sure that our project at least gave a proof of concept thing out there for others to look at. And we're excited to see how people react to these and see if they're useful.
So nothing is changing about what you see actually on the meter. It's only that you have to have your smartphone there that will be taking you to these other sites to get additional information.
To access these, you can do it by computer or by phone. Yeah, so there isn't, so you can use these for trip planning, and you can use these if you've gotten to the neighborhood and you're not sure which direction to go. And so there's different applications for them, but these are not, the meter will still just show you the price of the meter. So when we start changing the prices, they will be pushed directly to each meter, and every meter will always give you the most current price, and it will match what's on these apps. If you're
So
looking
there's
at price.
no upgrade of the meter screens.
Correct. This is not a technology upgrade, but I'm happy to take notes on that if you'd like me to, because we do constantly work with our vendors to provide.
Well, I can
better
never see
technology.
I can never see what the meter is saying, and particularly anytime you're in the sunshine, the reflection makes it almost impossible to read. So I admit, I end up paying, maybe this is good from the county's perspective, I end up paying the max because I can't see what it tells me as left or anything else. I just, push that button because I can't read it. I can almost never read it.
Just a slight comment related to that. My wife and I last weekend were kind of driving around down in the Roslyn area, and maybe about half of the parking kiosk, where it's the one device for all the meters on a strip, half of them were out of order.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We have had I don't want to call it a rash, but we've had a series of vandalizations of our Roslyn multimeters. So where the meter maintenance team has gone out and found that someone has taken like a hammer to the screen, and it's like thousands of dollars to replace. So we're in the process of trying to obtain like nearby building security camera footage and see if we can find out something about that. I don't know that that's necessarily the reason for the ones that you saw, but I know in Roslyn in particular we're dealing with that, so it might be related.
It also raised a question in our mind because we saw some stickers kind of indicating or encouraging you to get the parking app, and we didn't know if they were just really trying to force people into using the app rather than maybe taking away the physical kiosks there.
Right, certainly that is not, that's not on the agenda right now. Yeah, so there's no current trajectory of removing the kiosks. I think in the longer run, the county should be looking at the cost benefit of kiosks versus mobile, but I know from my limited, frankly, experience with the community and parking devices, that it's really important to have both, because right now we have a really wide array of technology familiarity and availability. I would say like the best current solution to your experience is to try to use Park Mobile, because then it's on your phone and you can go to a shady spot and you can see everything on it. But if you're not a mobile payment person.
I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah.
I'll echo what Jackie is saying, apart from if they're not operating, if they are, 3/4 of the time you really can't see the screen. Either the screen is getting burnt out because it has 80,000 hours of use time and it's getting dim, or if it's worse, if you're in the sun, you can forget about it.
Well, the third one is the plastic deteriorates and becomes model.
Opaque.
Right.
Yeah, opaque, yeah, the plastic can actually.
Well, it's the
get-
ultraviolet too, it just starts with a plastic.
Yeah, so it's not dark enough, it gets opaque, and if the sun is on it, it's not readable.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback, and I think it's the kind of thing where, as we work with our vendors to buy their latest and greatest equipment, we look to see if they're making improvements on those designs. And I have to imagine that you're not the only one who
So
has
you're
that
telling
issue.
me if I use the mobile app, it will recognize a particular meter and allow me to pay for that meter?
If
Yeah,
you plug in the number.
the
Yeah, you gotta put
number,
the number in that's listed on it.
Is the
Yeah,
number,
it's
is the
on the
number,
meter on the side and the big
okay, so
sticker.
it's a big number?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
it's like-
It is.
But I will say there is a transaction fee, so for full disclosure, it's
Okay.
like 35 cents for the
That's
transaction.
better than paying the max all the time.
There you go.
Yeah, it probably is, and it is the kind of app where once you have to put your vehicle information in, but once you do that, it saves it, so the next time you go to park, you just pull up the vehicle you're in, and you put in the number for the zone.
What's nice of the app is it has like a timer on it, so if you put in 15 minutes and you're in the store and you can see when it's getting down, it's like, oh, I need to extend it.
Yeah, it gives you a
It'll
reminder
put
when you're
up a-
15 minutes away from expiration.
Yeah, it'll
It's
say, do
actually
you want to add
pretty
time?
nifty.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
And the pilot only deals with paid spots, but obviously there are non-paid spots within those zones, is because if you could provide availability, I mean, obviously you're not probably going to invest in the sensors for unpaid, but you could, I suppose it could add what the deal is, because on some places you got zone parking until 5 o'clock and then 1 hour parking until 4 PM. And so, I mean, so it's like, sometimes you need to be a lawyer to figure out whether you can actually
There are
stay at a place.
conflicting things,
Or
too.
or other than a lawyer.
Right.
So one of the other things I've noticed that's nice with the app is when you get to like, say it's getting to a point where you're at the max and then it's free after a certain
Right,
time,
right,
you
right.
try and put in too much and it won't let you.
Let you, right, yeah,
Because
which is good, yeah.
it's gonna be free after that, so.
That is nice.
Well, it's also the contrary. So there's a particular block I know of actually, and someone in the county does, because I meet county people there, where that you can't park on the corner after a certain time, but the meter still takes the money, and it's confusing. So again, this is another one of those, and I actually asked the people I was meeting with from the county if they could find out, was I legal or not?
Yeah, so I will say, any of our meters,
They didn't know
the
either.
meters will take your money, the regular multimeters will take your money regardless of whether the meters are being enforceable hours. So if our
Well,
meters,
sometimes they don't.
Well, this was like I wasn't allowed to
If you
park.
use the kiosks, it'll say no payment due.
Well,
Is
this
there a
like
place
you're
where
not
people-
allowed to
somehow
park.
people will still pay though. So
Right.
it might be that they're paying it, if it stops at 8 PM, they might be paying at 7 PM for 3 hours, and it just takes it all because it didn't tell them that.
Right, and I think if you're there before,
Point of
8 AM starts, I think that also creates I'm not sure
Point
you're
of
able to
order.
put in.
This case-
Point of order.
Sorry.
Yes, point of order. Is there a place where people can report issues with meters that they have, rather than us discussing all of our personal issues that we've had with parking meters in the county?
Indeed, I mean, report a problem.
Report a problem?
Yep.
Great, thank you.
And we
We
will
hit a
happily
nerve.
fix the meters if they're broken.
I thought it was open forum.
Yes.
Let's move back to the pilot.
So last question, I think Frank alluded to it. So is the pilot specifically about the performance parking, or is it also the app that shows like the availability?
It is the apps too.
Okay.
So, the apps, basically the pilot is testing the theory that better pricing that is demand responsive and better information is going to make for a better customer experience on the street. So the information part is a part of the whole project design, and we're doing information in a handful of ways. These are the most obvious, providing an app / web interface for the availability and price. However, we have other plans too that are in various stages of reality. We are going to be demoing real-time dynamic message displays out on the street. So I use dynamic in quotes because as you know, this isn't dynamic pricing, but the message display will say there are 20 parking spots this way, 5 parking spots that way, and we'll give the prices. So we're still working on the design of that, and we're gonna demo that probably in this courthouse neighborhood first, and we'll announce it and show people where they are so you can go by and see them. But the idea would be testing again if that kind of information, which doesn't require you to look at your phone while you're in the car, but you're actually just approaching courthouse and there's a parking lot and there's some street parking, and the sign will just tell you what's available in each. So that's another piece of information.
I think the airport does that. They'll say there's so many spots on the 6th floor or whatever. Yeah, but and then they have lights, which sometimes work, and green light, red light, over the spots, so you can.
And even the Costco parking lot, Pentagon City, you go in there, tells you how many spots.
Yeah, so that's another example, and yet another example of information that we're working on is the potential for having a public-facing data dashboard. So we are doing an API. The APIs are for the technology folks who are going to build with them, or maybe researchers, people who are going to actually pull massive amounts of data. But for your average community member, we envision it would be nice to be able to see, at least in broad brushstrokes, some visualizations of the data and to be able to filter them and look at them in their own sort of free time. So we are actually working internally on developing one of those. So I'm not sure if it'll be live right when we start or shortly thereafter, but it's certainly one of the other examples of providing good information.
So that may be a later slide where you talk about the API and the third party, and I wanted to have a better understanding of what data the third party would be getting, and was it connected to the app that has your vehicle information?
No. So the data this is the slide, because I think my next slide is about the data. The API will have the same data that is fed into these, not the Park Mobile app, but fed into these apps. So it's only the occupancy data from the sensors and the price information. So that way, a vendor like Park Mobile can take the occupancy and take the price and show it on their display. So if Google wanted to show our street occupancy, it could choose to do so. If Waze, which is Google now, right? I don't know, some other example of a vendor that was doing this kind of visualization, they would be able to have access to it as well.
Whereas the Park Mobile, as you explained, which is to me a big issue, has your vehicle information. Therefore, if you're using that, it tracks wherever you are.
I don't know what Park Mobile, so I don't know I can't speak to how they handle your, plate at a location at a time, if that makes sense. The county doesn't get Park Mobile data that way. What we have is just the transaction data at our meters.
Yeah, but
So we don't have that with
it doesn't selling it to a third
It
party.
doesn't track you, it just uses like an email address as a key so that it makes sure that if somebody comes by to see that your license plate and the make and model of your car and your license plate matches what's been paid. So it's just like a key. It's not, they don't follow you when you go home.
Well, that's the kind of privacy information that whether or not people will use it will depend on whether or not they believe it would be sold to a third party for tracking. And so in the absence of that information, I can't use the Park Mobile.
Well,
I just, because
that's available, it should be available in Park Mobile privacy practice. So I'll pull
tell
that,
you whether or not they sell it to.
I'll pull it down and send it around if you want.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Thank you for that.
Do the apps provide information on the handicap space?
They have that same, yes.
They do have that.
And in the app version on the left, when you zoom into a street segment closer and closer, it'll show you each space by type. So you can actually filter by the ADA spaces separately if you wanted to.
Good. And in some green future will be the possibility of adding EV charging spaces or spots.
Yeah.
Someday.
Absolutely.
So that's another question on the ADA side. I would definitely, it sounds to me like your data would be able to tell you if the ADA spots are more than 80% over time. Because I think for those of us who use those handicap spaces and need them, that is an issue where we haven't been able to quantify what the accessibility is in different locations. And while I'm getting better personally at being able to walk at least 2 blocks, there certainly has been a time where if there wasn't a space near where I wanted to go, I had to go home. And so that's consequential. If this would allow me to say, oh, I can likely go there.
Yep.
And even knowing the percent of time that something is open. I mean, I would plan my shopping around that.
Yeah, and you would be able to use these apps to do that. And in theory, I know that the right-hand one is intended to be able to do it. I'm less certain about the left-hand one right now. You can also do, once we have a historical data set, it can do perspective. So you can say, I want to go shopping on Friday at 4 p.m. And then you can set, like on this one, you can set that time and zoom into that area and see availability. So planning tools should help you with that. The
one
other,
on the right doesn't tell you handicap.
not yet, but it may, because we're working on the back end data
Well,
labels
that would be
for it.
huge for handicapped drivers, being able to know whether a space is likely to be available.
Yep.
Would really be huge, because
Yep.
frankly, there are lots of places I don't go because it's not likely that I'll find parking.
Right, and another piece I want to mention, and I know it's not true necessarily of every handicap space user, but the idea is usually you need to get close to a destination. And it might, and we reserve those spaces because the blocks are otherwise full. But because we're working on this model of if we increase price on those other spaces, we're actually going to increase availability by asking people who have more choice, who can walk a further distance to pay less at another location. What you might also end up seeing is more availability nearby the handicap space too. So you might find more proxies when you wouldn't have in the past. You focus narrowly on the one because it's most likely to be reserved for you, but in the future, there might be more availability on the whole block, as an example. Yep. Yeah, so I think I hit all the technology pieces here, like the software, and we talked about the dynamic message display demo. So next couple slides, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our data. Now, we've only got, I think these are data from August. I think we mocked these up, and we now have a full set of September data, so we're working on the September data versions of these. But one of the things that you probably, conclusions you come to is that if you, depending on the granularity in which you look at the neighborhoods and at streets, you get more softening of lines. So these are 4 trends that talk about lunchtime peak activity and evening peak activity at the neighborhood level. So in the whole data set, averaging each of those hours of the day. And you can see the black lines are 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So in between them are the metered hours. So in Crystal City in August, between those metered hours, over the entire data set, the averages of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and so on were those averages. So you see there's this little peak around lunchtime, and there aren't really evening peaks. If you drop down and take a look at Ballston, same month of time, the peak behavior is a little different. And you do see a lunchtime peak, but you also see an evening peak. And this might resonate in your mind because you think, well, Ballston might have more open evening activities like dinner places, whereas Crystal City has a lot of construction and a lot of things that aren't quite open yet, so it's a little more distributed and maybe it doesn't have as much of that. So these are just, I don't have proof, these are just ways that we can think about and visualize what's happening by hour of the day over an area of a neighborhood. So lunchtime peaks are the top 2 graphs sort of showing them. Evening peaks are those bottom 2, Ballston and Clarendon. But what's really what it comes down to for us when we're looking at the data is also honing in on what's happening on the block level. And now we're not planning on changing price block by block by block, but we are looking at patterns in a neighborhood. And so this is a snapshot from that same month period of Pentagon City. During Pentagon City's 3 hours of peak parking occupancy, which for Pentagon City in August happened to be 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And you can see here that there's a clear difference between what's going on Joyce and what's going on Fern and Hayes, on the backside of Costco and that area above. And so these are all, so red is greater than 80% occupancy on those blocks. Blue is less than 40% occupancy, and white is that what I call like the Goldilocks zone, the 40 to 80% occupancy, where people can expect to find a spot on the street and you wouldn't find it to be problematic. So this type of look is the kind of look that staff are taking at the data to make decisions about whether chunks of blocks are going to be shifted up in price or eventually maybe down in price. And when we talk about lowering price on blocks, it's in conjunction with the idea that it's potentially a replacement asset, if that makes sense. Like, you wouldn't raise a price in Ballston and lower a price in Crystal City and expect someone to park in Crystal City instead. But it's really about proximity. And if you have things that are really close together, but good replacement assets of one another, then a higher price in one and a lower price in the other might actually move the needle. So those are the kinds of, we're doing both spatial analysis here and trying to really visualize what are the problematic times and problematic behaviors that we see in a neighborhood.
Does your data show duration and average duration and duration during different time periods? Because, you know, some of them are 2-hour parking and some of them are 6-hour parking. This would help inform, I mean, that's the other thing you could change that would impact availability, would be how long you're able to park someplace and what the activity is that people are doing there also determines whether they need more than 2 hours or whether 2 hours is sufficient. So some of the peak places, a lot of the peak places are restaurants, and they may or may not be staying within the 2-hour line. That's a dicey issue for people who do longer than 2-hour lunches. But it certainly affects whether or not the next crowd should get there.
Now,
The executive lunch there, Jackie?
I'm talking about.
now movies are really problematic. I mean, 3.5 hours for Daughters of the Flower Moon.
That's right.
Did you see that?
I didn't know that.
Is it?
So in answer to your question,
I
our
did that
data
before.
does show duration of stay. We have not yet done visualizations for analysis purposes on the duration of stay, but we have it and we will have it, and it will be a component of our analysis. In part because, in a couple slides, I think I'll get to, in the ordinance request that we're making of the board, one of the things we want the ability to do is potentially change time limits on signs.
Right.
And it's not going to be blanket across the board because we don't have the money or the manpower to go out and change every sign. But if we see a major mismatch between the signed time limit and the duration of stay, it could demonstrate that there's something beyond just price that we want to do to adjust to the regulatory structure.
If there isn't some reason why people have to be there longer, you could prevent people from parking in one place and not moving, and therefore making it more available by reducing the time frame.
Yep, and we anticipate that a combination of timeframes being associated with actual need and price being better associated with how much people want to park there, helping to facilitate turnover.
I know this came up last time, but is this data based on occupancy or paid occupancy?
This is pure occupancy. This is from our sensors in the ground. And we do have, we have transaction data too. And we are using the two together through a different sort of staff-facing visualizer to see the difference between paid occupancy and true occupancy. And I haven't, we honestly haven't been delivered that to properly play with yet. So I saw a presentation and I got to take a screenshot or something. But on that one snapshot day example, what I was seeing was 50% of time was being paid for. So it's quite a bit lower than occupied time. And so as we continue this process of reporting to you all and communicating about what we're learning, one of our intended practices is to actually provide packaged, useful information to the parking enforcement team so that they can understand where the hot spots are of this differential and they can target their enforcement resources. We can't magically give them 20 more staff to do better enforcement in that way, but we can certainly help them do more efficient enforcement by looking at those differences. I'm trying to get this to.
Just out of curiosity, so for parking enforcement, if it's a, say, or a 2 or a 3 hour maximum time slot, someone doesn't move, but they keep coming out feeding the meters, do they monitor for that or do they care? I know some jurisdictions, they put a little dot paint on your tire so they can know whether or not.
That's how they do it here too. They chalk them. Chalk them is probably a euphemism for whatever they use to mark it, but they do mark tires and they do keep track of that. I don't know the exact protocols for the enforcement side of things, but that is a technique they use.
Because it's a potential abuse, so if your intent is to have a turnover in the parking 2 or 3 hours, but someone just, they're in the office 5 minutes away, they keep feeding quarters in the machine or they come.
Or with the app, they don't even.
Exactly. But they do monitor that as the answer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I apologize. Something while we were talking happened with my SharePoint connection, which is a bit surprising. Let me see if I can get the PDF that I sent you to open. Goodness me. All right. Noron, if I switch to, is there anything else I can switch to that might be a better, like if I switch to Arlington Wireless, is that a safe risk for me to take?
That should be fine. Yep, try that.
Okay. I'm gonna try that. So bear with me. Sorry, everybody. We're having such an active discussion that it's not gonna get through this presentation. Okay. And let's try.
If not, try unsharing your screen, logging out, logging back in. Okay, there you go.
I think I'm back on. So there's something happened with the other Wi-Fi network. Okay, I'm gonna speed through those slides. Get us back to where we were. And I say speed, but I have to go slowly because if I do fast, I'm sure I'll break my machine. And here we are. Okay, great. So this last set is really about about next steps. You've seen a version of this slide before. Just wanted to reiterate that we are measuring success through an iterative process of gathering data, analyzing it, and implementing changes in our regulatory structure each time to try to continue to influence the behavior about which we're gathering data. So it's iterative and it's about occupancy. And it also will include elements of public outreach and engagement throughout the process. We also have a parallel process going on with VDOT, who is our funder of our project, has an independent team separately funded by them and led by Kimley Horn, not led by us and not connected to our direct vendor team, who are using our project goals to conduct a system optimization process. And what we mean by that is they are using our project goals and collecting other measures that are different than what we can collect in our project to try to see if we're meeting our project goals. And in theory, are doing it from an objective place, not being invested in and part of the project itself. They'll be observing traffic volume data, circuity of travel measures, double parking in relation to the streetscape and the potential safety impacts of that. So they'll be using other sources of information, including feeds from our public feeds from our traffic cameras at some key locations in the project area. And they'll also be collecting data directly from travelers on their immediate parking experience. So this is intended to be, I think we're hoping for pop-up requests for a rating that will appear in Park Mobile. So if you park, it'll say, tell us how that was, kind of thing. But also the ability to scan QR codes at your meter, at your multimeter, to give immediate responses to how that parking experience was before and after we make price changes. Yeah, and so that this team has a before-after design to the extent possible in their data collection and analysis. And so that brings me to our, what I would call our key project next step, which is an ordinance proposal for the board, which we're hoping to go to the board as an RTA in December or January and as an action 1 month later. And we need to ask the board for permission to administratively change price during the rest of the duration of the project, which is roughly 2 years. So the key features are on these slides. The applicability and sunset clause, just wanted to remind everyone, this ordinance change only applies to meters in the project area. And since there are meters outside the project area, we propose to retain all of the standard ordinance contents for those meters. And without further board action, this ordinance would sunset at the end of 2025. And it would just go back to the old language. The authority is delegated to the county manager or designee, and that's a staff and manager coordinated process. The frequency of adjustments would be no more than quarterly, which is every 3 months. We just can't do it any faster, even if we wanted to. We're going to be struggling to meet that rate of change, frankly. Thresholds of adjustments. So this is really giving us the framework that we're not going to predetermine what trigger changes a price, but rather that we're going to be increasing prices in response to higher demand and potentially decreasing prices in response to lower demand. So we're leaving ourselves some flexibility because we might determine that smaller or larger increments of change would be necessary in areas to be effective. The time limits, this gets to this idea of duration of stay and our ability to influence it. We are suggesting that we have the ability to change duration of stay, to change time limits and locations. They are decoupled from meter rates, which they aren't currently in the ordinance. It's sort of odd, but the rates in the ordinance are hard-coded to each time limit. And we don't know why that was in the past, but it's certainly not helpful for a project like this. We are not intending any comprehensive sign changes. So if we do sign changes, they will be much more targeted. And we are also not expecting to do initial price changes to the ADA spaces, in part because we have heard from the community a concern that ADA space customers are price sensitive too, and they're location sensitive, so they can't really feasibly walk 5 blocks to get from a cheaper space. But we also have to have time to do our separate analytics on the ADA space occupancy and to understand the other factors that are going on around them. Other features of the ordinance, complexity of rates. We expect that rates may differ throughout the day and week. And what that means is that the rate in Clarendon on Friday evening might be different than the rate in Clarendon on Monday morning, for instance. The days and times of metering also may be adjusted. So we might, while currently the vast majority of our meters run from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., we may determine based on the data that it makes sense to run some meters later in the evening in order to continue to manage occupancy during those times.
Less. If you're going to add time, is it possible that you'll find out you don't need them for other times?
It's possible, but what we have seen in our data, for instance, we have data on Sundays where we don't operate our meters today, and Sundays are some of the most high demand hours of the week, and it's probably the most high demand day of the week, and that's maybe because the meters don't charge anything, so it's a bit of a chicken and egg there, because if we don't charge anything, it it potentially causes people to decide if they want to try to drive. But if lots of people make that same decision, then it constrains occupancy and supply again, and it makes it harder for people to find a space, and it creates some of those effects we're trying to avoid. So far in the data, we see meters used all the time, even like when they're not metered, when they are metered. And a lot of the meter hours do correspond to when places are busiest, but the Sunday example and maybe some areas in the evenings example are that if there is a performance problem on the street, it might make sense to use meters to help to mitigate that performance problem.
You're not using this at all for zone parking? Correct.
Residential parking zones don't
Because
have
I
any
can
meters
see if
right
this
now.
is successful, that might be another type of analysis that would be useful.
Yep, and I think an understanding, we are aware of the need to keep an eye on the edges because our meters and our zones do kind of butt up against each other. But usually the zones also are constrained according to those high demand times of the commercial areas. So those areas that have evening zone parking instead of daytime zone parking are reacting to evening activity in the neighborhood too. So they're mostly tailored to help mitigate that, but we will be looking at that.
Yeah, they're also tailored, of course, to prevent parking near the metro all day.
Yes, but those are different sets of zones. So usually it's a different, some zones have both, but a lot of them have one or the other according to how those uses are
Just
happening.
obviously one of the other hot topics is the residential zones, and this technology, while expensive to put the implants in, would give you, with some pilots, particularly those that are in the areas where they know that there's some serious issues, might help with analysis there.
Yeah, we are hopeful that one of the things we'll learn is that this is useful technology for us to easily roll out if we have the software infrastructure to do it. Because for instance, the sensors we have in the 22nd Street and Eads parking lot are actually surface mounted because we know that parking lot is going to get dug up and turned into a building in the Crystal Houses project development. But for now, it's at 99 metered parking spaces. So we figured that for now, we should collect data about parking demand in that area. But they can be removed, and they're not. Whereas the ones that we embed in the asphalt are permanent until they get destroyed. They aren't removed.
Can you remind us of the cost per sensor for the two?
It's about $100, not including
for both
install.
types, the embedded and the not embedded.
Yeah, I think so. Because not including install. There's install costs associated with it, but those are they're not like on a per unit basis because it depends on how many you do. What else did I want to say about that? We have data about residential parking permit zone occupancy because we do a periodic sort of randomized sampling of RPP zone streets to do an occupancy survey on. So that data is available. And if it's not available online, it's something that we can provide out to anyone who needs it. And we use it periodically.
For the residential?
Mm-hmm.
But how often is that done?
We do it once every several years. Then we do all of the RVP zones and we do a sampling of all of those streets. So it's like intended to be kind of a scientific sample.
Yeah, the issue in the community is primarily with a lot of new construction of multifamily units on the edges of neighborhoods and what that means about, and unfortunately, one of the things we're doing is creating a situation where neighbors are fighting over scarce resources. And it doesn't make it a welcoming atmosphere either way.
Noted. Okay. Geographic distribution of rates is covered in our proposed ordinance language. This is really just to emphasize that staff need the ability to allow the rate structure to vary geographically across these neighborhoods and blocks. Escalating rates, we do have a clause in our proposal that that would allow us to test an escalating rate structure. It is not something that we're expecting to, we might not be able to do it at all, frankly, it kind of depends. But the idea of an escalating rate structure is that when you park, the first hour is $1, and the second hour is $2, and the third hour is $3 to incentivize people to turn over, because each time it gets more expensive. And that was just an example. An escalating rate structure can eliminate the need for time limits, because you can tweak it so that in those areas where you want people to stay only about an hour, you can make it so that it seems like the smartest approach to stay an hour based on the price.
Right, and it can also address the issue of entertainment zones too, where earlier you would be less demand, and as you get later in the evening, perhaps higher, right? So you could.
Yeah, well, you can have the rate structures vary by time of day, so
Right, I think DC does
escalation.
something like that in places.
Yeah, and it might be flat during the midday and the morning, but it might go into an escalating structure in the evening. There is some amount of complexity and explanation that would have to be engaged in trying to implement that. It would most likely only be relevant in our highest demand areas that might be otherwise intransigent to price influence, if we have to be more aggressive on it. But we want to keep it as a tool on the table. So it's in the toolbox we're proposing, and we're hoping that it can stay there in case we have the opportunity to try it.
Needed parking till 2 a.m. in Clarendon.
Oh, goodness. I'm never up at 2 a.m. anymore. Increments of adjustment is just to state that we may move rates up or down in whatever increment is most successful to achieve the project goals. So realistically, we're looking at modeling a $1 increase per price change presently. So like the first price change would propose higher areas go up by $1. But we want to leave some flexibility there, because if we're lowering prices, we might want to use a smaller increment. Or if we find an area didn't respond to $1, we might want to try a higher increment the next time.
That's $1 per hour.
Yeah, $1 in addition, per hour. So if we started at $1.75, it could go up to $2.75, or maybe we want it to go up to $3, and that would be $1.25. So we just want some flexibility there. And we're proposing a maximum rate of $7 per hour. And what that means is that over the course of up to 7 realistically quarterly price changes in the project, which would be $7 of activity, and that's if you changed it upward every time for every price change, which is highly unlikely, we would not exceed $7 per hour at any space anywhere in the county. And that also happens to represent 4 times the current rate, which is $1.75. So that's also on the table. And those are the features of the ordinance that we're going to put before the board, that will become an RTA and then become a board action. So I'm certainly interested in any reactions you guys have to each of these features, and I'm happy to flip back or forth to the slides to give you some more info on those. And I just got one more wrap-up slide. I wanted to mention we have an open house scheduled for December 6th from 7 to 9 p.m. in the Navy League building across the street from here. And that open house will be designed to just give boards on every feature of the project, but also lots of boards on data and lots of boards on the ordinance proposal. So there'll be more data information than I can offer you here tonight, but we'll be ramping up our materials so that we can talk about it and give a lot more illustrations of it. Excuse me for that meeting. And we do expect the happy or not parking request for information to start later this fall. That's the VDOT evaluation process, and they'll be again collecting existing conditions information about customers' experience with parking, and then we'll continue to collect that data during the price change periods. And we are also scheduling what we're calling small group conversations with retail employees planned for early 2024. So we're really trying to target much more detailed conversations with people who might be impacted by this, but who have fewer choices perhaps than the retail customers. So that's the end of my slides, and I'm happy to flip back to anything that anyone wants to look at in more detail.
2 round robin around the table.
This is a exciting.
Yeah,
Very nice.
yeah, thank you.
Fantastic job.
Great
Yeah.
job.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
you coming and filling us in some more there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on the board action, I think it's clear to me that the sense of the commission is that it's really important that we have some performance measures around the ADA spaces. So that.
So you're in concurrence with our plan to not change the prices immediately, but to look more at the data once we get more of it?
I think that's a safe approach for sure, but I think overall for the pilot project in general, the impact on the ADA users, I think, is a key equity consideration that needs to be in the final analysis, addressed in the final analysis.
Yep.
There was one item I saw on the delegation to the manager or designee, it's right there, authority. Is there going to be a lowest level that the ordinance allows the delegation of authority?
Realistically, what it's going to look like is that our vendor team prepares the price recommendation based on the data. Our internal staff team dig into that recommendation and cut it apart and make sure there isn't anything weird in the data behavior that suggests something different, and make some executive decisions. For instance, the price recommendation may recommend lowering prices, but we're not going to do that to start. So we're going to vet and create a staff recommendation that covers the whole project area. And then we're going to present that to the manager, and we'll provide the manager with probably map information so he can visualize it and see it. Quantifications of it, and we're actually going to provide this to the public too. Every time we do a price change, we're going to have a little info packet that gets posted online that shows like how many spaces went up, how many spaces went down, how many spaces stayed the same, right, and some neighborhood highlights and the things that we saw and why we were doing it. So we're going to package it that way for the community, but also for the manager so that he can have buy-in and basically authorize us to move forward. But he can also cut things out if he doesn't like something that we're proposing.
I get all that. What I was asking specifically is about the ordinance. Will the manager have the authority to redelegate that decision authority lower if he so chooses?
Yes. So we anticipate preparing a memo that shows the delegation hierarchy. So maybe he'll decide that it only goes up to our DOT director, or maybe only up to the department head. But we also want to make sure that he always has the opportunity to look at it, but that memo will outline essentially if not available, this person, if not available, this person, so we have it all framed out legally.
Sure, great.
But to follow up on that, I think that's really important from the public perspective, that you have a level that it doesn't go below.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, our previous advice to the board coming out of the Clarendon Innovation Zone was to do more of these types of pilots, and specifically to delegate the authority to do these experiments to the lowest level practicable based on the risk profile. And so I think this is consistent with that, but I think that is one of our previous recommendations to them. So not sure exactly what the structure is inside below the manager, but whatever the lowest level as appropriate for this risk profile. I think you're changing prices on the general population, so it's kind of risky, but it's not life and safety risky, right? So
right. And it might vary over the course of the project where the manager wants to take a look-see and chime in quarterly. This is only happening quarterly, it's not super often, but every so often in the project, but not on every one.
Yeah, but to Jackie's point, I think it should be clear in the ordinance at the lowest level that's possible to delegate it to.
And how will you be publicizing the quarterly updates so that people are really aware of this?
That's a good question. I know we'll post information on the website. What we have done for some of our other information pushes is push them out through the transportation e-news. Mm-hmm. But I'm open to any suggestions in terms of best ways. We have our sort of list of stakeholders, and the stakeholders will probably hear from us on each of those, such as bids and chamber and other, I can push it out proactively to them. But we do tend to lean on our listservs because we also expect our stakeholders to be subscribed to those listservs, because that's a really efficient way for us to get information out to them.
Didn't you say that there was going to be a site that folks could go to? Would that be another option?
Yes, so the little packets of info we'll have up on our project page, so we'll probably have a running list and people can pull up each of the price changes and look at the summary of it. It's different than like the dashboard we hope to have available, which will also be accessible from our project page, but we'll have like the data live to play with, if that makes sense. But yeah, in terms of publicizing each rate change and being really proactive about that, if you all have any recommendations, feel free to shoot them to me anytime.
I think it'd be helpful or important to have some element that would see the pushed out, not just relying on people having to go to the county website, because I don't think they'll get enough people.
Right, Jackie?
No, I can't, I don't know whether you're providing the details of what's going in the RTA or not, because I didn't notice them when I looked at it before. I think that it should be pretty specific about the level of transparency that you're going to have for your data. And that's another area right now that's an issue of considerable concern about trust in terms of whether or not data will be made available. So if there's data that you know you're going to be making it available, put it right in the advertisement so that it's clear to the public that it will be available, not.
Well, I guess I would say the ordinance is a change to the meter ordinance that exists today. So the ordinance language is about obtaining from the board the administrative authority to make these changes to price. It's not so much about how we manage data. So there are things I can take into consideration, but right now all of the information in the ordinance is about the authority to administer price and not so much about sharing the data of the project more broadly.
Well, it just seems to me that one of the things that could be the background for whether or not, as a board member, you would want to adopt this process that allows people to change price is what kind of information will be available to the public as a basis for doing that. And so I guess what I'm suggesting is, yes, ask for the authority, but also provide information about the minimum information.
The study design, right?
Yeah, the study design.
And I think you've done a lot of that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But it definitely needs to be in the package that goes to the board.
Yes, and the board report will have both data and the justification in terms of how the whole project has evolved, the outreach that we've done, the feedback that we've gotten, and why we're coming to them with this. So what I can do is I can look and make sure that the board report also specifically describes our approach to sharing information in this next phase.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, and because board members, particularly if you're having this change at a lower level, board members are going to get questions from people. And so they themselves are going to want to have data when these changes are made. And they probably, I would think if you were the board, you might be willing to delegate it, but you would want to be informed before it happens. As a board member, I certainly would want to know if the rates are going to change. I would want to be advised of that.
Also, reasons. I think the sunset clause is great. That's something that didn't happen with the Clarendon Zone project. But does anyone want to take a crack at drafting a letter to the board on this project for the board action?
I was going to say that you should probably put them out. That's what the details.
Anybody? And when is the RTA going to go to the board?
At this point, we're targeting December, but because of elections and the fact that the board changes between December and January, it may get pushed to January if they want the RTA and the action to happen under the same board. So it's still a little bit up in the air, but I would hazard no later than January, but it could go in December.
Okay. Anyone want to write on this?
I'm not sure that I know how, like, what that entails, but it.
So typically we'll write a letter opining on this board action and vote on it and say, here's our official opinion as the tech commission on this board action.
I could give it a shot if I could get a partner to review and help me and make sure I'm following protocol.
You'll definitely have a partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can take the pen.
I'll give it a shot.
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We got a couple months to get it done, so.
All right, anything else on PPP? If not, I will move on to.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you
everybody.
very much, Melissa. We appreciate you coming. It's,
Very important.
really exciting use of data,
Yeah,
sensors, and smart cities.
Yeah. we really appreciate your
Search it.
participation in this. It's great.
Smart county.
All right, Frank.
All right, here we go. It's going to be. not
Speed
yet.
read.
Speed read, and there's a lot going on, legislative update, but I'll do my best to make it fast. FCC Chairwoman Rosenworcel announced a proposed inquiry to take a closer look at how artificial intelligence impacts illegal and unwanted robocalls and texts. Guess what? The bots are coming.
Bots have been here.
Yes, they're getting worse. They're getting smarter. That's the problem. FCC Chairwoman Rosenworcel, again, is proposing final rules to prevent discrimination in access to broadband services based on income level, race, ethnicity, color, religion, and national origin. These rules are in response to the non-discrimination mandate contained in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. The White House Office of Management and Budget has indicated may soon ask Congress for additional funding for the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, because right now it's projected to run dry in April of 2024.
Clearly, our advocacy is having an impact.
Sway, yes. Starting next year, schools will be allowed to use federal E-rate funding to pay for Wi-Fi on school buses, pursuant to rules adopted by the FCC last week. The city of Scranton, Pennsylvania has issued a request for quotation, RFQ, that's it, not me, inviting applicants to bid to provide fiber broadband service to all homes and businesses in the city with minimum synchronous upload download speed of 1 gigabit per second. Ideally, the RFQ would tap available funding from the American Rescue Plan Act or under Michigan. Just kidding.
I knew that was coming.
New York City has launched the NYC Smart City Testbed Program, an initiative allowing city agencies to collaborate with private companies and academic institutions on pilot projects that will primarily operate in public spaces. The pilots will be self-funded by the applicants, with the city providing access to its assets, technical support, and administrative guidance through procurement, legal, and other regulatory processes. Initial pilots include use of drones to scan buildings for structural flaws, sensors to measure how and when people use different modes of transportation. Sounded actually a lot like the Clarendon, the CIS Innovation Zone, and a system to pull pollution out of the air, vacuuming pollution. So those are the 3 early samples. California has enacted a new law requiring local agencies to batch process permits when they receive 2 or more broadband applications for nearly identical broadband private sites in terms of equipment and general design, but not location, submitted at the same time by the same applicant. Batching allows an applicant to submit one master application for multiple sites to have them processed simultaneously, simplifying the small cell deployment application process. And the FCC has, as I earlier anticipated, adopted a notice of proposed rulemaking to reinstitute internet net neutrality rules on broadband internet service providers. And the U.S. is joining force with the UK, Australia, Canada, and Japan to strengthen coordination on telecom, security, resilience, and innovation. And I'll give this to you since you're.
Do you have a soft copy?
Minutes, I can send it to you. I'll say, okay. Actually, Prescott took the hard copy, but I'll keep it. Send it to you. I'll send it to you. And that is the legislative update for October. Norrin or Richard, any DGS updates?
So a couple quick updates. So Arlington hosted the Mid-Atlantic StatNet 10th anniversary gathering on Friday, October 20th, last Friday. More than 23 local jurisdictions and nonprofit agencies in attendance. Today's discussion centered on artificial intelligence and the opportunities and risks for governments looking to harness this transformative technology. County Manager Mark Swartz and myself kicked off the event, sharing thoughts and our vision on AI, including how the technology will make engaging with government easier and more convenient for constituents. Also, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley closed out the day by leading a roundtable discussion around how to effectively build on service delivery and data-driven government foundations in order to leverage and manage AI productivity. I'm trying to go fast.
Yes, no.
Is there a summary of that online?
Or that you could distribute to us?
Not yet, but I can send something to you.
Okay, all right, good.
Thank
No, I
you.
appreciate it.
Senior leadership vacancies, Deputy Director announcement closed last week. 9 candidates spanning public and private sector experience are selected for first round of interviews, and the Chief Experience Officer announcement also closed. 5 candidates selected for first round of interviews. That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much. And that brings us to the good of the order. Any other business? If not,
I would like to hear more about AI at some point.
Yes.
Well, so
I mean, I don't expect you to explain
Yeah, no, I
the
think-
entire issue,
no.
but through the lens of Arlington and what we need to know vis-a-vis this innovation and filling John's office spaces and everything else. You obviously thought about this and you just heard about this, and I think we would all benefit from a short
so we can,
presentation.
yeah, we can go ahead and set something up. I would actually have David Hurley do that presentation for you.
Could we have
Good.
that as a presentation, maybe at the next meeting or something?
Yeah, at one of our,
David
Do we
is
have
actually,
time?
David is presenting in November on the website.
Yeah,
Dave,
but
so I think it might be a little much to do both AI and what, but,
Do a follow-on where he can present again for AI.
maybe in
December,
December we have the broadband
okay?
phase 2 study, so maybe January.
January, okay,
Yeah, no,
whatever.
Yeah, no, I think it's,
Wait,
not something,
I think
yes,
this is
yes.
I
something-
think we have like one meeting in the spring that's in between budget, like
Right,
maybe
yes.
February, so wherever that one is.
Right.
I'll have to look at the calendar.
Okay, yes, but yeah, we're trying to juggle them all.
Yeah,
No, I
there's no
absolutely,
urgency.
no, I absolutely
It's
think that it is
should be on
something
our-
that we should be talking about, and actually, I happened to run into David Rare, I don't know if you know David.
I know David very well.
Anyhow, George Mason apparently has a
He's big on.
initiative on intelligent automation.
He's
so-
very big on that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe we can work something.
Yeah.
Possibly, so. Because they're
I mean,
apparently,
there's a
they're
lot
reaching
of-
out to
there's a
Marymount.
lot of hype.
yes, I know. Yeah, he's,
And I would like to get this over.
I mean, we're going slowly, you know, obviously some of the things we're looking at is we need to put together an acceptable or responsible use of AI. So there's data gathering we're doing for that right now, and we're trying to educate the workforce about, you know, do's and don'ts of AI, especially with everybody trying to use ChatGPT, which we're not on board with that because it's not secure. And we're also looking at expanding like generative AI for the use with our bots to help with the customer experience, AI enabled bots. So we'll get into more details.
We're really hoping that,
Taking it slow though.
we're really hoping to get
Slow is
to
great,
where we can use ChatGPT for our minutes. So, not yet, right, not yet, but someday.
I mean, it'll produce minutes, they won't
They
resemble
don't reflect what happened.
what happened.
I know, a little hallucinatory minutes. To be honest, we have the requirement to do minutes.
I mean, just, you know, real briefly, one of the things I talked about during the conference we had last week in my opening comments is really the data quality behind it. You know,
Right, oh, yeah.
Good data in, good data out, bad data in, bad data out. So you really need to have good data quality tools in place as well as, you know, fact checking. Because just because it's put
It'll
out
lie.
there, yeah,
Right.
it may not be accurate. So those are some of the challenges I told that specific group that they need to look at as well. And everybody's on board with that same thing. Same aspect.
I think
Again, happy to
it's
have
a
a
topic I think we definitely want to delve or hear about and delve into.
Yeah,
Let's get it on the agenda.
Appreciate it, yeah. That would be good.
Go to the order.
Yes, good.
I'll even volunteer to take the minutes for
All right, yes, Jackie.
Question, and it may not be relevant. So my question is, when different departments are asked to or commit to doing dashboards, Are you involved in that, or do they do separate contracts and have somebody else come in and do their dashboards? How does that work?
So they do it in-house. It's your business intelligence analysts in the different departments that work at. So from an ETS perspective, we'll provide the backend platform. So it's Microsoft RBI. But we're not the ones who are creating those dashboards. Each department does their own dashboard, and they have their own in-house experts to do that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and that goes again. The
Right.
reason why I asked that is because that's related to my continuing budget thing. Is
Yes.
we want to, before we get the budget, I'd like to be able to get a view of where we're spending money on things like this
By agency.
by department.
Yes.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of those, everybody wants a dashboard now.
Well, so I mean, the Microsoft license would cover the dashboard for use throughout the different departments. It's just the one who's actually setting up or configuring it is an in-house resource within that department.
Yes.
They're trying to set up communities of excellence where they're sharing best practices across different departments. So you know, when someone figures something out, obviously you're going to share it with the other department on how to do it.
And that's why I was asking about the data transfer, because as you are, I'm sure, well aware, the delay in the development of a expanded housing option dashboard has been a considerable interest and issue in the community. And so I was wondering like where the pieces are that make that not happening on schedule. So,
I'm not tracking that specific.
right, so that would be an example. It would be being done at CPHD or, yeah. Okay.
All right. Anything else? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Good questions as always, Jackie.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes, carry, and we have a speaker. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, really.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
for joining us this evening.
Nice, guys.
I'm gonna turn off recording and transcription now.
That's scary.
I'm not here to like